I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction. Wanna bet?
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Big Money Siege. A lot of news to get to on this Monday. We got to start in Montreal.
Cole.
Big Money Cole, you're absolutely right. We go from Big Money Siege to Big Money Cole because he is due to make some big money. Not too long before we started recording this morning, the announcement of his 8-year extension worth $7.85 million as an AAV announced by the Montreal Canadiens. Let's talk about this deal. What do you think of the contract?
Well, I mean, it's a little higher than maybe where projections might have had it. Was at $7.85 million, but I like it for a lot of reasons. I think getting an 8-year contract at this stage of Cole Caufield's career, obviously it's great for him. It's financial security for he and his family, but I think for the Canadiens end, it's a good upside bet because one thing we learned over the weekend is, okay, that the salary cap might not be going up more than $1 million next season, but Gary Bettman was pretty clear when he spoke to the reporters at the Stanley Cup Final that, starting in 24-25, the year beyond this one, that, we're probably going to have a significant jump in the cap. And so I think combined with the fact that you expect Caufield to get better, that his best years are ahead of him, that the cap is going to go up and probably significantly, I think it's fair to say in across the 8 years of this extension, it's hard not to like the bet for the Habs. And it's a good commitment from him too. I don't know that there was any doubt he didn't want to be a Montreal Canadian. Don't mean to suggest that, but we've seen some players on their entry level deals opt for shorter contracts. I think it's a nice piece of business for the Habs, all things considered. And you just want to have a healthy Cole Caufield on the ice next season. It'll probably start making that deal look good right away.
Seriously, just seeing the guy's shooting ability, the goal scoring ability, like on its surface, to me, it looks like a steal. This is a guy who, if you let him play through a whole year, he may very well get to 40, even 50 goals. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. I get that's projections, and I get that anything can happen in a player's career, but this kid is this good that he could get to that point. Like I see him signing under $8 million, and I'm like, wow, like that is, I think if you're Kent Hughes, that's some good business.
For sure. And now you've got, Suzuki, the captain, a little bit above that, $7.875 million in his case. So you've got a nice internal structure going. Obviously, the Canadiens are still building up their program. They're going to need more great players, quite frankly, until they get where they want to get to. But it's nice to have these ones signed long term at pretty manageable numbers. And they also front loaded the deal. So should they ever, in terms of how the money's paid out, and so should they ever want to be trading, Cole Caufield, which at this point in time obviously is in no one's mind. I mean, he becomes a more attractive commodity across time because more of the money will be paid out when you get into the later parts of that deal. So I think that they've given him a smart contract and left themselves some outs should they need them, because let's face it, you're betting on human beings. Like there's things that happen in any player's career that you can't project or predict. It's no guarantee these will be a great 8 years for Cole Caufield, but based on what you've seen so far, I mean, you love the passion, you love his ability to score goals. In particular, since Martin St. Louis took over the team, you've seen the really best version of Cole Caufield. And so, I think it's a good day for Montreal to get that deal done where they did.
I'll run through some of the details of the contract quickly from Cap Friendly. There's no movement clause. There's a no trade clause that kicks in year 6, a 15-team NTC, then turns into a 10-team NTC in the 7th year of the deal, and the 8th and final year, it's a 5-team no trade clause. The first 2 years gets paid $4.975 million with $5 million signing bonuses in the first 2 years of that deal. That in year 3 gets 9.975, then year 4 8.705, then year 5 6.215. But the AAV is still at $7.85 million. That's the big number everyone cares about. But the no trade clauses only kicking in year 6 of that deal. That also took me by surprise. Sometimes you see some of those young players, or just in any of those types of contracts, you think, okay, are they going to get a no movement deal clause, I should say, in the contract? Are they getting a no trade clause for the entirety of that deal? The fact that it only kicks in the final 3 years of that deal, that also was something I noticed.
Yeah, partly I would think that's just because he's not eligible for one in the first years. You need 7 full seasons in the NHL before you are eligible to have one of those. But you're right, it's not a full no movement clause, and it's so funny when you sign this deal. You're like, well, they're not going to think about trading him, but maybe in 6 years' time, for whatever reason, that might make sense, and they'll be happy they didn't give him the full movement clause. I mean, that's why teams and players grind over contracts. And this one took a long time. I don't know if you remember, Julian, but there were some discussions on this extension during the season. I don't think it was a straight line 6 months grinding over it, but it didn't come together immediately. And it removes, I don't know that there was ever any real threat of an offer sheet coming Cole Caufield's way. We don't see very many of those, of course, in the league at all at this point, but it also removes any possibility there could be one. So, the Canadiens front office can sleep a little easier now too.
Anything else we want to mention about Cole Caufield before we get to You Can Bet That? And then we've got a few other topics to get through. Mike Babcock as well. We got to talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup Finals, of course, and it is Ask CJ. So anything else we want to mention before we get to You Can Bet That?
No, I think that's good. As I said, just hope that the Cole's healthy coming back after the shoulder issue he had last season, and can start making the Canadiens look like they did good business here by playing really well next season.
Let's get to You Can Bet That and the rest of the CJ Show.
You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Brought to you by Sports Interaction. Get in the action and make a play. 19 plus. Please play responsibly.
Welcome to You Can Bet That. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all your gaming needs. We did go through some possible names last week for the Conn Smythe Trophy. We know Sergei Bobrovsky entered the series as the betting favorite. That's still the case. Jack Eichel's still up there. What about some love for Adin Hill? Had himself a great game one, made an incredible save. Currently, according to Sports Interaction, has the 5th best odds at winning of the Conn Smythe Trophy at plus 680.
This is an interesting Conn Smythe Trophy year to me. Like, quite often you get to this stage of the final, and maybe it's one or two people that you think are going to win. Like, it's pretty apparent, like, if Team X wins and Player Y is definitely the person. I don't feel that way this year. And so you wonder about someone like Adin Hill, if he has more moments like that, could he get in there? I will tell you, Julian, since we recorded last, I have been confirmed as one of the voters for the Conn Smythe Trophy. So I won't say too much in these segments that may skew things, but I'm just saying, as a voter, as someone who has to, at some point when this series wraps up, put down 3 names, I really don't have a strong feeling about who those 3 names are. I think we could probably narrow it down to a pool of 6 or 7 players between the two teams. But Adin Hill would be in that group. And so, he's had an interesting playoff, much like Sergei Bobrovsky started as a backup for the Golden Knights, got thrust in that series against Edmonton when Laurent Brossoit went down with an injury. And he's given some pretty remarkable games, given that this is a guy that had not played a Stanley Cup playoff game before this year.
Yeah, he entered the Stanley Cup Final with slightly better statistics than Sergei Bobrovsky. He was my pick before the series began to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. I don't know for people who have been following the articles, I've been writing about the postseason at The Athletic. We've had some of our experts make some picks, try to figure out, okay, who's going to win this series, who's going to, stuff like that. And before the series started, they asked me to do a Conn Smythe pick. I looked at Adin Hill, and it's been kind of quiet for him, right? We've looked at Sergei Bobrovsky and how incredible he's been all postseason long, but Adin Hill coming in relief for Laurent Brossoit and turning into the goaltender that the Golden Knights need. He has been very much an underrated story in this postseason.
Well, and the Golden Knights' success has really been a team story, right? I think that's part of it, is that there's not one driver. Not that any team is driven by just one player, but it's hard to ignore Matthew Tkachuk and Sergei Bobrovsky on the Florida side of things. Whereas, if we're Vegas, like Jonathan Marchessault, he's got 10 goals in his last 11 games now in the playoffs. You got William Karlsson, Jack Eichel, Mark Stone could get in there. He scored a nice goal in game 1 of the series. And then you got Hill. I mean, there's a lot of different ways it could go for Vegas, but don't sleep on Hill. I think he could. I think he's a little bit of a sleeper pick, but I don't think it's necessarily the wrong one.
Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com for all the best odds. Also add the /SDPN while you're there too. Before game, in game, and the best props. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Athletic Greens. I gave AG1 a try because I wanted better gut health, sustained energy, a better immune system. And I got to say, just taking all these different vitamins and pills every day, I'm not really about that. Why do I need a vitamin C pill, a vitamin D3 pill, and all the other ones you have to go to a pharmacy to get, when AG1 is essentially a one-stop shop with 75 high-quality ingredients that give me daily nutrients and long-term gut health support? I don't know about you, but less is more in this situation for me. And if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your very first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/Johnston. That's athleticgreens.com/Johnston. Check it out. We go from Cole Caufield to You Can Bet That to Mike Babcock, the former Toronto Maple Leafs head coach, Detroit Red Wings, Anaheim as well, gold medal winner. We know the resume when it comes to Mike Babcock, but according to reports, it looks as if he will take over as the head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. I'm surprised about this. We've talked about Mike Babcock on this show. We've discussed his treatment of certain players. That's very much out there, and it looks as if he is going to make his return to the NHL with Columbus. Like, I don't know where we should start with this. Like, we're kind of throwing this topic up in the air, but I'm still kind of surprised that it's reached this point where he's back, and also with this team. I have other thoughts on that too, but we should start there.
Right. So my TSN teammate, Darren Drager, hat tip, had the scoop over the weekend. And, this had been out there a little bit just because Mike Babcock, it was known, had spoken to the Blue Jackets shortly after the season when their coaching position opened up, when they fired Brad Larson. And I think my thought all along was, does he want to come back to the NHL, and would he want to coach somewhere like Columbus, where obviously the team is coming off a season where the most competitive thing that they had this year was the Connor Bedard lottery, right? And unfortunately for them, they didn't win it, but they were right near the bottom of the standings all year long. And they've obviously got good players. Injuries were a part of the story for the Blue Jackets last year. A lot of their best players missed significant amount of time. And so I think that did derail the season, but also from where they're at in their sort of stage of growth, I think that there's still some stages to go. And so that's maybe the part that caught me the most off guard with Babcock going there, is I just sort of felt that if he was going to come back, I kind of thought he would be with a team, trying to get a team over the top, a team that maybe needed another push, a really good team that hadn't met expectations. Maybe a team like the one he left, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Not that I expect him to actually end up back in Toronto, but it's a team in that stage of their development is sort of what I thought would fit for Babcock. But I do think, in thinking about it a little more and talking to some people, I do think he wanted to be somewhere a little quieter than Toronto in terms of a media market and a focal point. He's continued to make the Detroit area his home. It's not so far from home in that respect. Columbus is a great place. Honestly, I think it's one of the underrated spots or stops on the circuit in the NHL. It's just, my understanding is this is going to be a short-term deal when it's completed. And it seems like a longer-term project is in front of the Blue Jackets. Perhaps this is maybe this is a signal to what's going to come as we enter the busy period when it comes to trades and free agency. Maybe this is going to be a team that gets aggressive in that period to try to turn around their program on a little sooner timeline than we might have guessed otherwise. But yeah, it's not, you probably could have, if you could have made a bet, you probably would have won some money back at the middle of April, saying that the Babcock would end up in Columbus. And it just seems the only thing holding it up, quite frankly, Julian, is he is still officially an employee of the Maple Leafs for the remainder of this month. And he's been paid a lot of money for a long time not to work by them. It'll be just intriguing to see, is he different than the person who left the NHL? Obviously he did have 1 year at the University of Saskatchewan with the men's hockey program there, but it's been a long time since he's worked in the league, and his success is undeniable. His resume is undeniable, but I'll just be curious to see what version of Mike Babcock returns to the NHL when he is back.
In terms of the people you spoke to about Mike Babcock, what did they say about him as a person? What did they say about him as someone who knows that what's out there has been said about him in terms of how he's a guy like Johan Franzen comes to mind, and the treatment of him, the Mitch Marner situation as well with the list. What has been said about Mike Babcock in terms of his personality? And do you get a sense that there's been a change from Mike Babcock, from those people?
I don't know how much he has changed, if at all. I mean, look at everyone. There's no doubt that he's reflected on his time in the league, right? He's had a couple years to think back, to think ahead to, if I come back, maybe I would do this and that differently. But I don't think he's fundamentally going to change who he is. I mean, he's a hard driving coach. And I still think that there's room to be a hard driving coach in the league, but how you treat people in pushing them to their ends is probably the details that matter here most. Right. And there's a few circumstances that we're aware of and that, he has actually acknowledged, probably not to the way that people might want to hear sort of an apology from him, but he has acknowledged that he's gone too far. And specifically with the Marner and Franzen cases, in the couple of interviews he's done since losing the Leafs job. And so I think that's the question, right? And it's something the Blue Jackets obviously have had to wrestle with in making this decision too, is can he adjust his ways and still have the same amount of success or a similar amount of success to the past? Because nobody is arguing with that resume. He's won absolutely everywhere from junior hockey to international hockey. Obviously won a Stanley Cup with Detroit, took Anaheim to the final and lost in Game 7. Even the Leafs, I know it didn't go ultimately the way either side probably wanted when they signed an 8-year deal, but that team turned around pretty quickly under Mike Babcock. And it's because they drafted some good players, but I think as a coach, he deserves a lot of credit for how he ran the program. But there's a big but there. You don't want to excuse those incidents either. So I don't see any way he doesn't come back a different coach. I really don't. But I don't know how it's going to go either. Again, 3-4 years, it's not a lot in our life. Time goes quickly, but it's a long time. The league's changed. I think the way of coaching has constantly sort of evolved. I mean, the best coaches in the league now, I think, are bringing a softer style. Quite frankly, I think that it's been an evolution in that regard, and I think it's one that a lot of coaches have had to adapt to. Probably more communication, certainly than what we might brand an old school coach. You sort of talk to the players when you feel like it. I think it's a far more collaborative process now, and I think coaches have to empower their players. So it'll be curious because, as I say, the Blue Jackets to me, they sort of looked like a long ways away from being a long ways away this season, and so it's a big job for anybody that would be taking that position, and it's going to be especially someone who's known for being so demanding as Mike Babcock. I mean, how does he approach that? Because I don't see them, no matter who's coaching the team, challenging for a playoff spot this year. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm viewing things incorrectly. I see a giant hole down the middle of the ice for them. Obviously I think a key to their program big picture, they've signed Elvis Merzlikins to a big contract. He's had a fall off in his play. Can they resuscitate what he does? What does a fully healthy season with, Werenski back on the blue line look like? You hope Laine's healthy. You've got Goodrow. I mean, they have players. I don't see enough there for them to jump up and be, putting 95 points in the standings column next year. And so how does he handle that, basically? I mean, this is not a coach. He had the one season in Toronto. He oversaw their sort of tank year, if you want to call it that. And if you look at it, they didn't tank the way we've seen some teams tank. They've won a lot of games that year. Like for a losing year, it was pretty respectable. I'll put it that way. But I think this is going to be a real interesting one, Julian, just to see where this goes. And remember, it started off with John Tortorella. I remember being shocked when John Tortorella went to Columbus years ago, and that ended up being a long relationship. And they had a lot of success with the players they had there under Tortorella. And so maybe this will work. Maybe this is just crazy enough to work, put it that way.
Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I mean, John Tortorella, you're right.
It's a gamble.
It was a gamble. He was a hard ass himself, and he got some success out of the rosters that he had, but he also had a shelf life. Mike Babcock, I wonder what life will be like for him now in this era where you talk about player empowerment. We're in an off season now where at least two coaches I could think of have had players say in their exit interviews, like, you know what, we don't want this guy around. Right. And Daryl Sutter and Gerard Gallant come to mind. So when I hear a guy like Mike Babcock with the resume, yes, but the stories attached to him, I know I kind of mentioned the Mitch Marner thing just kind of offhandedly, but he was asked to rank his teammates' work ethic. And Johan Franzen, who has gone to media and said Mike Babcock is the worst person I have ever met. If I'm a player on the Columbus Blue Jackets, alarm bells go off for me. Aaron Portzline has been reporting on this, and he reached out to Zach Werenski. And while I'm just kind of paraphrasing off of the article here, while he said he wouldn't speak directly to Babcock being hired, he said through a text message, myself and the other players trust GM Jarmo Kekalainen completely to make the right decision. And at the end of the day, we all want to win hockey games. That's one guy saying it, and I get that Werenski is one of the team's leaders. I wonder how Patrick Laine feels about this. Johnny Gaudreau, he's played for hard asses pretty much all his life. His dad was hard on him, Daryl Sutter, and now there's a potential of him playing for Mike Babcock. Like, how do some of the bigger players feel about this? That's the biggest question I have. Like, it's one thing for Babcock and his style to mesh with these guys. How are the players going to receive him? Like, that has to work at the end of the day. It's one thing for this team to not even be close to being. I'm with you. I don't think they're a contending team, but the dynamic between the players and the coach has to work, and it has to work in an era where there's more player empowerment and they're not taking the same shit that some of these coaches have given them in the past.
That's fair, but also, I mean, I think that they need a coach that pushes them out of their comfort zone, right? I mean, last year can't be acceptable either. I mean, that's the line. I'm sure this has been I'll say this. This has been the sort of hardest to follow head coaching search of all the ones this offseason because, you know, the Blue Jackets talk to a variety of different types of candidates. I mean, obviously, when you bring in someone like Babcock, I know they spoke to Peter Laviolette, you know, guys like Andrew Burnett, who's sort of on the younger end of the scale here, known to you know, coach up offense, for example. Like they've talked to a lot of different types of people. And I think if you're in that front office, you're thinking, how do we get more out of this team? Like that last year can't be acceptable, right? They felt like a team. They weren't just bad. They felt like they were adrift, right? Like they didn't seem to have, and I'll say it too. I've said it once, but like the injuries definitely played a mitigating factor. If you're not
absolutely,
if you're not playing with a full deck, like they didn't have Werenski for most of the year. Laine was in and out with some different issues throughout the season. Like it was a tough season there, but you're looking for some way to get more out of that group. And, you know, in today's day and age, it's a big statement to go out and hire Mike Babcock because he brings with him some gravitas too, Julian. Like you're right, some alarm bells for the players, but like he will have their attention. I can trust you that. And you know, I think that everyone is asking the same question we are. Just is he going to be doubling down on the same Mike Babcock sort of altruisms from 2017 or 2007? Or is this going to be a different version of the same guy? I think coaches can evolve. Like, for example, Ken Hitchcock over his career was known at times for being very hard on his players. I think he softened a little as time went on. And I do recall him talking about having to sort of wrestle with that. I would be surprised if it's Mike Babcock just acting like nothing happened when he comes back to that door.
We'll have to wait and see on that one, Siege. That is a story I definitely am going to try to follow for myself, and I feel as if we will talk about Mike Babcock again on the CJ show. Before we get to Ask CJ, the Stanley Cup Finals are on right now. Game 2, we are hours away from that. Game 1 was really fun to watch. What were your impressions of the game? We could also touch off on Gary Bettman and Bill Daly speaking over the weekend as well. But what were your impressions of Game 1?
I thought it was a fun game. I really enjoyed Saturday's game. Nice start, you know, after a long break. It felt like we waited forever for that Cup Final to start. And I understand there's TV interests and all these things that drive those decisions, but you know, you almost wish they could have just leapt into it a little quicker. But the teams didn't disappoint with the time off. You know, Florida gets a lead, can't hold on to the lead. The question I've been asking myself in all those days between the Cup Final is just, is Florida's sort of magic going to run out or not? I think they can play with the Golden Knights. I think ultimately the Golden Knights are a deeper team, and so you're just watching for signs of that. But I mean, I love the glitz and glam of Vegas. I just thought it was really cool. If you just step back, and I'm so involved in this. I know you are too. Like I live this. I live the NHL life kind of, but I'm always trying to put myself, like, imagine if I don't really watch all the games. I'm not familiar with everything, all the storylines. Like I just thought you turn that on and it was sort of a spectacle. Right. And I think that's what you want out of your championship series. And I thought it was a nice representation kind of the sport, of the city of Vegas. Like I loved everything that went around that first game.
Dude, the energy in T-Mobile Arena. By the way, I get it. I haven't been to every single arena like you have, but T-Mobile's already like top 3 for me. I'm trying to think. T-Mobile Arena is up there for me. The Bell Center, I could put that up there as well. I like Edmonton's arena. We can get into a whole arena ranking another time, but already it's a nice arena. But to see it from TV, from my couch, like the energy in the building, everyone getting amped up for the game, I wanted to run through a wall. Like, that felt so fun to just watch from a distance, man. It was so awesome. Like, I wish, I was watching on Sportsnet. I don't think they really showed all that much of the actual intro, but you can go online and find it. But those pregame intros, and you're hearing the John Wick music play as all the skaters are coming in, like, that is awesome. That is what a championship series should feel like. That was awesome. I can't repeat the word awesome enough.
Well, you're right. And it's almost like a nightclub in T-Mobile. Like it literally, yes. Like the music just like thumps in there. And there's, they got the whole showgirls behind the net. Like,
oh my God. Sorry. I don't know why my phone went off there. My bad. Sorry about that. Go off.
I thought you were just playing some music for me. Like, get me into the atmosphere of the Cup Final.
No, I was trying to move my phone, and then for whatever reason, it made a noise. Sorry about that. Wow. Technical difficulties, people. No, seriously. T-Mobile Arena, in terms of the energy that was there, the way the game 1 went down, even just the Aiden Hill save, we got to talk about that, because that might be the save of the postseason. It just had moments like that just really made that game so amazing to watch.
Yeah, the tic-tac paddle save. And, I think some people almost missed too. Pietrangelo comes in at the side of the net because there was a second chance from Nick Cousins after that Hayden Hill first save with the paddle of his stick, and Pietrangelo tied him up. So that I'm not trying to take away from the save at all, but if Cousins puts in the rebound, we're probably not talking about the save. We're talking about the almost save, but it's not quite the same thing. Pietrangelo helped bail his goaltender out there too. Yeah, it was a good game. I'm just hoping we get a series. Honestly, like, obviously I don't have a rooting interest here. I'm not cheering for either team. I'm not even cheering for my pick. Like, I don't really, but I just hope we get to a game 6 or hopefully even a game 7. Like, I think that's the best also for the sport. It'll be cool to see game 2, but then they go to game 3 in South Florida. Like, I think the Panthers fans will bring it. I was mentioning being there earlier in the playoffs. I was really struck by how, like, the energy was awesome there in round 2. So by the Stanley Cup Final, it's going to be something special. And I just hope these teams give us a long series. That as I say, I'm not rooting for a specific outcome, but I wouldn't mind seeing us have 6 more games this season, because the season's gone by pretty quickly. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. 6 games or less left in the entire year. Like, how did that happen?
What did you think of Paul Maurice's post game after game 1? Just basically telling everyone to relax.
I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if you remember this in the Leafs series. He had one strange post game press conference, kind of like that. He's making jokes, and I don't know where it comes from. Like, I don't know if he's trying to distract from his team, if he's just in whatever mood he might be in. Like, the games are emotional, right? And then the coaches are propped up on the podium pretty quickly after. Like, I don't know if you're just catching him kind of digesting the night or what it is, but it was funny. Didn't he say just fucking relax or something? Everyone take a breath or something like that. Like, it's not what you expect to hear, but good for Paul. I mean, first of all, got all kinds of time for Paul Maurice. I think he's so good for those that do our job, Julian. He's always very candid and thoughtful with when talking about his teams or other things going on around the league. But it was kind of a strange clip. Certainly wasn't what I expected.
No. Anything from, we only have so much time, but anything from what Gary Bettman said over the weekend? I know we kind of talked about the salary cap. There was a brief mention of the World Juniors team being investigated as well, and maybe we're finally seeing the end of that as well. Anything that kind of stands out from what he said over this weekend?
It wasn't a particularly newsy State of the Union address, I would say. I mean, obviously there's news. Whenever you get Gary Bettman and Bill Daly up there fielding questions for 20, 30 minutes, I mean, there's going to be newsy bits because, obviously they carry a lot of power within the league. They mentioned, Gary Bettman mentioned that the Ottawa sale process might take a couple weeks before it reaches its conclusion. I think one thing that's been missed in all of this sort of dialogue and discussion around the Senators sale is it's an unusual set of circumstances. It's being sold by the estate of Eugene Melnyk. And so by definition, the job for the estate is to get the most of money for the estate. And while you might say, well, that's if an owner is just selling his team or her team, they would want the most amount of money. I don't think that's always the case. I think you might have a 25-year owner in the NHL who wants to make sure it gets handed off to the right person. It might even take a little bit less than the most being offered to make sure it goes to the right owner. And so it's a different kind of sale process than what typically goes on. But so, yeah, the fact they said that could take a couple more weeks, I think was newsy because I know a lot of the reporting from Bruce Garriock and others out of Ottawa is that, they've been bracing for this is the week. Ian Mendez too, for it feels like 3 weeks now. And they might still have a couple more. This is the first time we heard timelines placed on the investigation into the sexual assault allegations against the 2018 Canadian World Junior team. Bill Daly mentioned that the internal investigator for the league has done all the work that needs to be done there and is now in the process of summarizing that work in a report that the league expects to get in early July, obviously at which time the league will review what's in the report and make decisions if any are needed in terms of punishment for the players. But the fact it's not like we're almost done, it's always been a little bit gray, I would say, but the fact that we know that report's due early July, suggests that we're probably going to get some clarity on that within a month or two. They did address the Valerie Nichushkin situation, if you recall, that it unfolded in Seattle during the playoffs in the first round. And basically they said that they know what happened. They're satisfied with how the team handled it. Obviously we don't know exactly what happened, but there was a woman in his hotel room who was drunk on the day of a game, kind of a strange set of circumstances. We know that much. But they did clarify that Nichushkin is free to play in the league next year. Because remember, he just disappeared and didn't play the rest of the playoffs. Like no one knew for sure where he was. I think there was some speculation he was back in Russia. Mm-hmm. And so maybe some clarity there, although we'll have to see what happens come September with regards to Nichushkin, where he's at. Nothing else really jumped off the page to me. Some talk about Arizona, talk about Salt Lake City, stuff I think has kind of either been reported on or kind of generally known. But let's face it, the NHL big picture is in a pretty good spot right now. There's not a lot of fires, right? I think that the Coyotes, the Senator sale we know is going to bring a monster number in, probably north of $1 billion. Going to be the highest sale price ever, I believe, for an NHL team when it's done. So that's good news for the league. It's just a matter of getting that to the finish line. The Coyotes situation is really the biggest question mark, just in terms of, how does this unfold? Is that team going to have to move at some point? We know they're going to play Mullet Arena next season, but that's obviously not a long-term solution. But yeah, there wasn't a ton of in there that was, wasn't a banger for press conferences where you're like, whoa, all this stuff. It was a little bit more controlled because I think the league's in a pretty good spot, all things considered.
We were talking about it in the group chat over the weekend while Ron McLean was doing the interview with Gary Bettman during the first intermission of the Sportsnet broadcast. And I thought, well, how long until the Sdpn gets credentialed and then we get to do one of those sit downs with Gary? Like, how many years would you kind of ballpark figure for this show?
Well, there would never be a sit down with Gary, I don't think. Those
I'm
are
allowed to dream.
Of course, but I mean, the ones you're seeing where he's like on the set, those are for the rights holders. Sportsnet and TNT are paying a lot of money to air NHL games, and that's one of the things they get.
You don't think Adam Wilde has enough money for rights?
I mean, I'd love it if it became of that. I would love it if that happened. The credentialing should happen. Like I'm not sure what's involved there. Obviously, I get credentialed for NHL events through my other employers, but mean, we're running a reputable shop here. Adam's done his morning gig. He's all in on the Sdpn.
Yeah, hat tip to Adam for all his years in morning radio. He decided he's going to not follow, he's going to put all of his work into the Sdpn. He even put out a tweet today saying he slept in until 7:30 today.
I can't even imagine being a morning show host. Like, I'm at the point I just go to bed early because I value my sleep so much. But I can't imagine getting up at whatever, 3:30 or 4 a.m. or whatever he's been getting up for years. I think he did that show for 5 or 6 years. Obviously Monday through Friday, but still, like, that's commitment. I hat tip to all of our colleagues across all the different radio networks that do that. I mean, I guess you just do what you do for the job, but that, I don't know how you wouldn't be grumpy all the time.
Yeah, he seems like a lot more cheery for a guy who does morning radio. Like, I'd have to do it for a week, and like, I should say I've done it like in a fill-in capacity, it kind of sparingly, nowhere near the same experience as Adam. And like, it's the fact that you have to keep yourself awake the rest of the day that is insane to me.
Well, and he does that show, and then he's been running the podcast network along with Jesse and Steve. But like, they've been like, you might have noticed, but we've been scaling up around here, and that's not because of you and I and Nick. I mean, we're doing our little, we got our little territory over here. We're putting out our show 2 times a week, but those guys are, buying buildings and doing renovations, building studios. Obviously, they've added more and more shows since our show came on. Like, Adam was working 2 full-time jobs.
That's insane.
Anyway, props to Adam. I know we're down a rabbit hole we didn't mean to go down to here, but I just think like that's crazy. So yeah, we're running a reputable shop around here. The Sdpn's only growing, so it won't be so long before those credentials start flowing.
It is a great time to be a sports fan. This is going to be a great and massive couple of weeks to come. On the ice, we have the Vegas Golden Knights and the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Finals. And over on the hard court, we have the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat in the NBA Finals. And you already know the Sdpn will be all over both of those series. For the hockey fans, check out the Steve Dangle podcast and the Chris Johnston Show. We will have you covered. And the Game Over crew will be back for post games. For hoops, check out S and Lauren on the Objective Basketball podcast. Watch full episodes on our YouTube channel or listen on your favorite podcast app. We are everywhere. Hey, happy Pride, listeners. We celebrate Pride here at Sdpn because we believe that sports are only fun if everyone is welcome. We're also really excited to share that we are once again working with our good friends at the Get Real movement, and we're joining their fundraising efforts by joining a virtual 5K on June 23rd. The money we raise will be going to Rainbow Railroad. Their mission is to help LGBTQI+ people escape state-sponsored violence. It's an extremely important cause, and we've got a link in the description below. Please check it out and support if you can. And stay tuned as we continue to celebrate Pride Month. We're just getting started. I kind of wanted you to go down another rabbit hole as we get into Ask CJ. Because you mentioned something a couple days ago about how this is like the first time since 2006 you are not on site for the Stanley Cup Final. I was going to ask earlier, like, do you like seeing everything go down in Vegas? Like, do you miss do you have FOMO right now? Like, I feel like you should be there.
Well, I wouldn't call it FOMO. I mean, obviously I miss it. Like, it's so cool. And it's like, it literally is an honor to get to cover the Stanley Cup Final. Like that's literally something I dreamed of as a kid because I wanted to be a hockey writer. So how do you measure whether you made it as a hockey writer? Well, getting to cover the big events, going to the Olympics as I have a couple times, things like that are when you actually, it's not just when you go to a Tuesday night game against an out of conference opponent, that doesn't necessarily have the juice. You're still happy to do that, but this kind of symbolizes it. But I would say I'm more grateful for what I've had than upset that I'm not there, if that makes sense. I've had an awesome career, and I'm really, and I know I'll be back at the Stanley Cup Final. Like, I don't view it. It's not an ego play for me, I guess, is the point. Like, I don't need, I went to 16 or 17 in a row. The streak ends now, but I still look at it. I enjoy it. I watched all of Saturday's game. I'm going to watch the game tonight. The point is, I don't think I'll probably miss one this whole series. I can still follow along, texting all my colleagues that are down there. A few of them have sent notes. Like, it's not the same without you and stuff like that. So I feel I feel, I don't know how to put it, but like I'm just grateful that I've ever gotten to go to that many Stanley Cup Finals. Like I feel like I've won the lottery times 10. So who would I to be complaining that I didn't win the lottery one more time? Like it's been it's really has been. It's almost surreal when you say it out loud. When you're so busy living your life in real time, you don't ever see the big picture necessarily, or it's hard to see the big picture. But first one I missed in a long time, but I'll be back again. I know that much.
Do you have any good road stories from all those years covering the Cup Final in a row?
Well, of course, some I can't tell. Some I can. It's funny though. So one thing that you may not know, Julian, because when you get to those big games, and this has been passed down, like this happened long before I ever was on the scene, but the journalists do what's called a game-winning goal pool. And the way it works is literally everyone's name that is a skater in the game goes into a cup, and the journalists just pick at random a name out of the cup. I think it's a $20 entrance fee these days, so the price is pretty good. So you get to, I think, $720 US, and obviously the player that ends up getting the game-winning goal in the game, that person wins. And so this has been a thing. Like, it's funny. Like, I always enter it sort of just because this was happening. Honestly, I think it was happening like 30 or 40 years ago. Like, it's somehow this tradition that gets passed around now. And Stephen Wino, if you know Stephen from the Associated Press out of Washington.
I know of Stephen, yeah.
Stephen, not only does he runs the quote loop, so he makes sure that he gets everyone's email on there, and the reporters do share quotes in the Cup Final because it's hard. Obviously, there's a lot of reporters. Like, the access is limited. It's just making sure everyone gets what they need to do their jobs on a deadline. But he also runs the game-winning goal pool. And a couple years, like, there's been some funny ones. I won it once in 2008 Cup Final, and I won it with Tyler Kennedy of the Pittsburgh Penguins.
How did you end up with Tyler Kennedy?
Well, that's the thing. It's at random, right? Like somebody pulled Zach Delpy out, for game one, or it's not all just the superstars that get pulled. And I remember actually a few years ago, a reporter named Tommy Seppala, a Finnish reporter, great guy. It was the Cup Final with Vegas and Washington, and he won with Brooks Orpik. And if you look at Brooks Orpik's career, I think Brooks scored 22 goals in about 1,100 career NHL games. Like, the guy did not score a lot of goals, but he happened to score one in the Stanley Cup Final. It was the game-winning goal. And then the next game, I think Tommy pulled Lars Eller, and he won. God. He won back-to-back games.
That's insane.
Which is like
a ton of money.
$1,500 US cash.
That's insane.
I mean, yeah, like, I spent a whole career donating $20 every game I covered of those Cup Finals, and I won one. So I'm lucky enough, but like Tommy wins 2 in a row with Brooks Orpik and Lars Eller. So you never know who scored the winning goal in the last game.
Because it was 3. Okay, so who scored the third goal? It was Was it Mark Stone's goal or Zach Whitecloud? It might have been Zach Whitecloud.
I think it was Whitecloud.
It was Whitecloud because that came first, and then Mark Stone scored.
Game and Stephen Wino comes up to your seat and you pull Zach Whitecloud out. With respect to Zach Whitecloud, you're probably not thinking I got the winner, right? So anyway, that's a fun tradition that's continued on. And I will say, even though I'm not at the Cup Final this year, Julian, they're allowing me to enter remotely.
Oh, that's sick.
So I transferred money to Wino, and someone is picking a name for me every game. So I could still win from afar.
Well, the funny thing you mentioned that, because I think when I was at the Cup Final in 2021, I'm not going to say who it is, but there was a game-winning goal that was scored, and a media colleague, again, I'm not going to say who it is, I saw them like jump up and down in excitement. And the whole time I'm watching them, I'm like, why are they doing this? Like, there's no reason for them to, like, why are they, like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, it's like,
I bet they had financial reasons to care.
Now that makes perfect sense, because this person was celebrating and they found another colleague and they're both celebrating. And I'm going to those guys, I'm like, what the hell's going on? I had no idea. This makes perfect sense. They were in this pool.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know. I haven't got my name for game 2 yet, but if that person scores in overtime tonight, I'll be jumping up and down in my living room. I'll tell you that.
Oh my God. Okay. Here's what we'll do, because that was a really good story. If it's okay, since we do have a ton of questions, I'm thinking for Thursday's show, we save some of those questions and we use some of them, but there are at least 2 I want to get to today. And if
All
it's
right,
okay
save
with
some
you,
of the questions. Yep.
yeah, there's one I will get to on Twitter. I guess this one's more at random. There's a specific one I want to take off of Discord, but the one at random I'm going to take is from Nate Thomas, Tate and Hamas on Twitter. Who's an underdog for the Flames head coaching job?
Ooh. Why does it have to be an underdog?
I don't know.
Like, because I feel like even if you say Mitch Love or something, like it's not really an underdog. Obviously,
He's not really an
mentioned.
underdog. He looks like a favorite right now.
Yeah, I mean, I still think maybe Alex Tanguay, but he's been mentioned too. Pascal Vincent.
Yeah, his name's been mentioned as well.
I know that he's been involved in discussions there, so maybe he's considered an underdog. But it's hard for me to label an underdog. I guess he wants me to pull a name out that hasn't been pulled out. But I don't have much juice for you there. Maybe Pascal Vincent will be my underdog.
Yeah, he's
coached in Winnipeg system, has been coaching in Columbus, was considered for the Blue Jackets job. And, it's sort of a name I will say that's been out there of someone who can make the jump and just hasn't yet got that opportunity as an NHL head coach. But I think the day is coming for him.
Okay. And this one from Ben B on our Discord. This is actually a little bit more serious, but I'm glad we were able to get this one in. From Ben B. My buddy lost his house to the forest fire near Halifax, Nova Scotia. He's a 100%er. His wife had to load up 5 kids in a van while his yard was on fire and slowly drive away through the fire because of all the traffic while he was away for work. Lost everything. Can he get a shout out on the pod? He never misses it, and it might make his day. His name is Jeff Roberts. He's a huge Leafs fan. Been a rough go lately.
Well, of course. I mean, Jeff, our thoughts are with you, man. I can't even imagine the turmoil your family's been through. I hope everyone's safe. And honestly, if you have a GoFundMe or something going, make sure you reach that out. Well, I'm happy to retweet it and to donate and help to get your family back on its feet. So we appreciate your support. Hope that better days are ahead and that at least everyone has their health in what must be a really trying time.
Absolutely. And I echo CJ's sentiments as well. Thank you for your support. And we hope that everything goes well with you and your family. And that goes to anyone going through those forest fires out in Nova Scotia as well. It's a bit of a tough time in that part of the country. And we just hope things get better. And with that, we wrap up the Monday edition of our show. I'll also give a shout out really quickly. Last week I did kind of mention, we don't have a jingle for the Ask CJ segment, and Turbo Turbs 94 made one. It's kind of cool. It's kind of funny whenever people submit those.
Can you play
Discord. Producer Nick, are you able to insert the song? You just do it over here, maybe, so people can hear it, and we can also listen to Turbo Turbs' handiwork. Again, thank you for that. I'm sure we could figure something out. That'd be fun.
I don't want to make more work for producer Nick. He's got a lot of stuff on his plate.
I get that. But even then, thank you, Turbo Turbs, for sending in the song. And for anyone who's also done that in the past, we will try to get to more questions on Thursday because there were genuinely so many. And also, you subscribe to the podcast, however you consume the podcast. And we'll be back with Stick Taps as well and more talk about the Stanley Cup Finals, among other big pressing news stories that come through. Any other final words before I wrap it up?
No, we're thinking of you, Jeff. You and your family, you and your kids, get back on your feet. We're happy to help any way we can. Just let us know.
For CJ, I'm Julian, saying so long and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction. Wanna bet?
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JKMcKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.